One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. Y'all, it's coming. Profit Podcasting is about to open again for enrollment, and I am so dang excited. Oh my gosh. If you've been wanting to learn how to start, launch, and market your podcast from me and all the things that I learn and I teach and I do every single week for this podcast, I would love to see you in the class. Go to profitpodcasting.com to learn more, and I cannot wait to see you in our private Facebook group for students only, where you can ask all the questions and we can talk about all the things for your podcast. So again, go to profitpodcasting.com to learn more. Oh, today's episode is going to be a good one because I feel like it's something that we haven't really talked about enough. I think that I've mentioned it here or there, and I've said, oh, I'm going to make an episode about that, and I haven't. And I was sitting down to plan out my content, and I was like, I have to talk about this. So today, we're going to talk about picking your podcast categories, what that looks like, all the things that you need to know, and we're just going to dive into some really good stuff. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach entrepreneurs how to start, launch, and market their podcast. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Because if you've been thinking about creating a podcast for a while, well, I'm so glad you found this show. Think of this as the shortcut / time-saving version of searching Google and YouTube for hours and hours trying to figure out the world of podcasting. Trust me, as a busy mama of 3, I get it. You don't have a lot of time to be spent or wasted, I should say, searching the web, trying to find all the right ideas and all the amazing things that are out there, and you just end up overwhelmed. Trust me, I've been there, done that, took home the souvenir. But this podcast is going to help you in practical ways because twice a week we'll be delivering episodes that are going to give you steps to help you create a podcast your audience can't wait to listen to. So let's get right to it, shall we? Okay, so like I said in the beginning, today we are going to talk about picking your podcast categories. But before we dive in, I want to give a listener shout out to someone who left us a review lately. So it's a 5-star review, and I love the title of it. It says, "Crystal is a geek, and I love it." Here's the deal. We all need people to geek out on things we need to learn. I'm so glad Crystal is such a geek for podcasting because she drops so much value and with passion. It's so refreshing and way more interesting to learn from someone who is passionate about what they are teaching. So many nuggets in this show. I learned something I can apply every time I listen. Keep it up, sister. And that's from Melanie Diane Howe. Thank you so much, Melanie. She has been on this podcast, and I saw this and I thought, oh my gosh, that's so sweet. And it just makes me so happy. And she does. She totally makes fun of me because she's like, you like really, really get into it and you really geek out on it. And I'm like, no, really, like, tell me how you really feel. But it's just funny because she's told me this several times. She's like, no, you can see it. Like, I can actually physically see it in your body, like the energy when you start talking about podcasting. So I know you're not just faking it or going through the motions. And of course, I'll tell her, I'm like, no, I don't even know how to do that. I don't even know how to fake it till you make it because I truly am obsessed with podcasting and helping you get your podcast up and running and then how you can grow it and scale it and just make it as successful as possible. So thank you again, Melanie. I'm probably blushing right now because it's so funny. I geek out on this and I tell people that too. I'm like, this is just me and like it or love it, or what is it? Like it or leave it. I just thought about that HGTV show, Love It or List It, like I guess I should come up with something that's related to podcasting. Love it or stop it. I don't know. No, we're just going to go on what we're supposed to talk about today because I could go down a totally different tangent. So we're going to talk about picking your podcast categories. And where I wanted to start today is when I first started, I did not pay attention to my categories. They were so general. And this is, I guess, like mistake number one is just picking something for the sake of picking it. So I'm going to go through some of the data and statistics because y'all know I love me some podcast history and how things have changed. But when I first launched, the categories were set up totally different. And I'm going to go into some of the things that have changed over the years as podcasting has evolved and continues to evolve and become more popular. But I just went really general. So if you don't already know this podcast was originally the Rookie Life podcast. And in there, like we aimed to speak to female entrepreneurs and share their stories about motivation and obstacles they'd overcome. And I just stuck the podcast in, I believe it was business and maybe entrepreneurism and then marketing, I think. I don't even remember because I've changed my categories a few times since I originally put out my podcast, but it was very general. I think that the top tier, because you can pick 3 categories for your podcast, the top one I had it in was in business. And I'll be real honest with you, until I discovered Chartable, which I'll link to Chartable in the show notes. I have a whole YouTube video on how you use it and why I use it and all the things. But until I discovered Chartable, I'd never even thought to look at my show on the charts because I just assumed that it wasn't out like competing with anything because I knew that I didn't have these crazy numbers. Like I've seen and had heard so many podcasts that had, tens of thousands of downloads every single episode. And let me tell you right now, this podcast does not have those kind of download numbers. No, it doesn't. Maybe one day, but as of right now, me recording this, I don't get tens of thousands. I don't even get thousands of downloads every single time I put out an episode. But I can tell you that whenever it was in these other categories, there was no way I was competing with the other shows that were out there. So that I just wanted to start this off with telling you where I started from, because I did not pay attention to these. So if you haven't to this point, that is totally fine. It is okay, because I'm going to tell you all the things that you need to know about categories. But like I said, I dug into the history of it, and I wanted to remember exactly when there was a huge overhaul. So last year, and when I say categories, I'm specifically talking about the ones that you choose within your hosting site. So I'm assuming a lot of you are using Buzzsprout, because a lot of you have told me that that's your hosting provider. I don't know what this looks like in another host, but within Buzzsprout, when you set up your podcast, there's a section called podcast settings, and that's where you put the name of your podcast and your podcast description and, all the other, your artwork, all the basic information that won't change from episode to episode for your podcast. And then you have the ability to choose 3 categories. And so let me see, I wrote down the date. So August of 2019, so last August, there was a major overhaul for Apple, and they updated all of their categories. And what they did is, instead of it just being business, they broke it into business finance, business marketing, business management. They started subcategorizing all of these large categories so people could find things easier, but also I think that they did it for the podcaster as well. For you to have the ability to rank within a category and not have to have millions of downloads in order to do that. Now, this is purely speculation. This is me giving you my opinion. I don't know the exact reason why, because I don't need to know, because they've done it. It's already happened. There's no going back. These are just what the categories are. So whatever you have to choose from in the drop-down menu, when you go to select a category, that's all that there is. It's not like there's hidden categories somewhere else, but I just kind of wanted to give you my perspective, because when I started, the categories were very different, and then they switched them last year. And now I feel like I can target the type of person that I want to speak to and the subject that I'm speaking on in a different way than if it was a lot more general categories. So I'm going to give you another example. So like I said, I was in business, maybe entrepreneurship or something like that. But my mom, so I've mentioned her a few times on the podcast. She has the Edible Gardens podcast, and she said that she had hers, I want to say it was home or something. And then now they have a category, because she launched in March of last year. So it's her 1-year anniversary. I'm excited for her, because that's a big deal. That's a big accomplishment. She has launched her podcast on March 1st, actually, was when she launched in 2019. But she had the same thing. She had this whole switch up of categories last year in the middle of the first year of life for her podcast. And so she had asked me, well, what should I switch to? And I told her to tell me. I was like, well, tell me what are all the things. And I think she might've been under hobbies. That's what it was, hobbies or leisure activities or something. And then she was like, well, should I switch it to home and garden? That feels really big, but it feels like that's where I need to be. And I was like, yeah, if I was looking for a gardening podcast, that's where I would go look. I would go check out to see what they had there. So I want you to understand, the first thing is, how do people actually look for podcasts? I know how I look as a consumer, but you want to understand how your listeners look for podcasts. And how do you do this? You ask them. Most of the podcasts that I listen to come from me listening to other podcasts, not from opening my phone or opening iTunes on my computer and saying, oh, I want to listen to a podcast about blah, 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 and I'm going to go search that category and look it up. That's not how I do it as a consumer. But if someone is brand new to podcasting and they're like, I don't even know where to go, you want to make sure you're in the category where they would search for a podcast of the nature of your show. Does that make sense? I hope you're following with me here. So I switched my categories up. So after, and I've talked about Buzzsprout so many times on here, but their Facebook group, if you are not a part of it, I'm going to link to in the show notes, crystalprofit.com/episode 134. You want to join their Facebook group. It's totally free. You don't even have to be a Buzzsprout customer to join this Facebook group. But the reason why I say it's so important is because they kept talking about categories in there and what was changing and all the things that were happening. And I spoke to my buddy Travis over there, and I said, hey, I see that all these things are happening with the categories. What should I switch to? Because just business felt very general still for this podcast. And I know I speak to entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurism isn't all we talk about here. I actually don't even go into the specifics of being an entrepreneur with this podcast. It's all about podcasting. So I was a little confused, and he let me know. He was like, well, you should probably be in education how-to. And I just kind of looked at him like, what? I mean, yeah, this is a how-to podcast. It's how to start, launch, and market your podcast. But I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, I never would have even thought to put it there because I have a business background. I am around business people all the time. And that was just kind of my default to where my mind was going, is I need to be in the business category. But when he said that about education, how to, it was like something clicked. And I just thought, yes, that's absolutely where I need to be. So if you have a question about your category, make sure you reach out either in the Buzzsprout group or in the Profit Podcast online community. And you can tell us, like, if you're confused, I don't know where to put my podcast, tell us in the group, this is what I talk about. These are the things that we teach on, or these are the conversations that we have, and we can try to steer you in the right direction. But you want to make sure you're in the right category because it gives you the opportunity to chart, okay? So I don't think that you should just pick a category so you can dominate in it, because if it's like not related to what your podcast is about, then it's not going to matter anyway. Like, you're not going to get a ton of downloads and all the things. But it is, I believe, the direct contributor to why my podcast has done so well on the charts, is because a lot of the other ones that are in there are literally education podcasts, not related to teaching something. They are education in the sense of I'm just going to teach, and not necessarily a step-by-step how-to. Does that make sense? I want y'all to ask me questions if y'all have questions about this, because it makes sense to me, of course, the way that I'm explaining it. But I really want to make sure that this really hits home, because it's very important. The category is very, very important, because marketing your podcast using the information from Chartable can be very, very strategic for you to get possibly sponsorships in the future, or to work with other people. Like, if you want to go speak on stages and you have the ability to say, oh yeah, I have a top 100 podcast, people pay attention to that kind of stuff. So I want you to be in the right category for your podcast and what you're talking about. So here's what happened after I switched. Like I said, I started showing up in the charts, and to be very clear, again, this is not the reason that I switched. I switched because this is probably where my ideal listener would be looking for me. Now, they could look for me in the business section, but I know that all the marketing podcasts, all the management, the finance, like all of those podcasts are going to be in the business section. And I wanted to be somewhere where someone is just stumbling around and they happen to land in there and they're like, oh yeah, I do want to start a podcast. I want to learn about podcasting from this chick because I like her colors and her logo looks good and it says start, launch, and market. I'm totally just feeding my ego. I'm messing with y'all. But who knows? Maybe that's how some of you found me. Probably not. But do you see what I'm saying? I want to take you along the customer journey, and I want you to get into the head, or not the customer, but your listener. That could potentially be a customer, but I want you to get in the head of your listeners. Like, where are they when they're looking for podcasts? Are they in the home and garden section? Are they in the international studies section? Are they in the sports, comedy, lifestyle? Like, where are they? And I really want you to think about, do I need to be in this category? So you can select up to 3 categories whenever you're selecting. So for me, I believe I'm in education, how to, and I think I am in business and possibly business marketing. But I want you to pick the first one. The first one, number 1, is the one that is most relevant to what your podcast is about. And again, for me, it was education, how to. For my mom, it's home and garden. And then she could also do hobbies and leisure activities if that's what she wanted. Or she could pick something else, whether it's earth sciences or something else, because she goes a lot deeper into some of the things that other, like your everyday gardener, wouldn't really go into. So there's many, 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 many categories out there, but I want you to select the top one that is most relevant to what you talk about. And if you have not launched, like I said, this is something that you do as soon as you set up your hosting site. So, and if you have already launched, here's the good news, is you can change your podcast categories at any time. It's not like you set it up once and then you're like, oh my gosh, Crystal, I've already picked my categories. I could never change it again. No, that's not true. Actually, I have one of my students, Brittany. She is a brand photographer and she teaches photography skills, but she also takes pictures. So she has a few different options. So Brittany, if you're listening, and we haven't chatted about this already, you could be in photography, you could be in business, you could be in personal style. I know there's like a lifestyle category. I don't know all of the categories, you guys. I wish I could sit here and tell you. I have all of them memorized. But she has a few options here. It just depends on, does she want to appeal to her listener as another photographer? Or does she want to appeal to the person who's looking to hire a photographer and wants to know more about personal brand? Maybe there's even a category under business branding. Like there's a lot of options out there. So I want you to go after the one option that is going to be top of mind for your potential listeners or your current audience. And if you're wondering, I still just don't know, please reach out in the Facebook group. We would love to help you figure out which category should be your number 1 or which ones you should be in. I don't think you have like the option to select the same one for all of 3, but I do think that you should fill in all 3. Like, because in Buzzsprout, I can go in and it'll say pick your top 3 categories. So I pick the first one, and then the other ones, you kind of just do an educated guess on what the other ones should be. There's no right or wrong answer. And like I said, you can change this at any time. But I do think that you should try to figure out which category is going to work best for your podcast. And that's all I have for you today, guys. So if you have any questions about this episode, please don't hesitate to reach out. I know we talked about a bunch of stuff today and your head may be spinning, but I do not want you to feel lost. If at any point you have any question like along the podcast journey that I have not covered, or I said, oh yeah, I'm going to do that in an upcoming episode, but I still haven't talked about it, let me know, because the things that I'm talking about are the questions that I see asked in the communities, or the questions that I've had along my own journey, or something that my students or my clients have reached out and said, Crystal, please talk about this because I don't understand. I'm lost and I want to make sure that I understand it better. So if that is you, please reach out. Do not hesitate. Find me on social media. Send me an email, crystal@crystalprofit.com. I would love to chat with you and pick your brain, get some ideas, because it's just so much fun for me, guys. It really is. Going back to geeking out on all these things. I really do. And it's so much fun. But that does it for today. So if this is your first time tuning in, I'd love for you to subscribe to the show. That way you don't miss any future episodes. I have planned on doing a few more bonus episodes. So if you heard the one I did with my son recently, that was a lot of fun. And I'm planning on doing a few more like that. But I don't post about those on social media. You can only get those if you're subscribed to the show. So make sure that you're subscribed, and I would love it if you would leave us a rating and a review. That helps us push this podcast out in front of more people, and it gets us, charting better in the right category for our podcast. And it really just gives me so much feedback on what you like to hear from me and the things that I can help you with in your podcast journey. So check out the show notes, crystalprofit.com/episode 134. And remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message, because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you, and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.